Hi everyone, my name is Levi Cosijn, and in this video I want to talk about the upcoming solar eclipse. It's going to be a partial solar eclipse in the sign of Capricorn, and this will happen on January 6th, 2019 at around 2:28 a.m. Central European Time. What happens during a solar eclipse is that the new moon moves between the sun and the earth, right, blocking the rays of the sun and casting a shadow on parts of the earth, right? Parts of the earth because, of course, the moon's shadow is not big enough to cover the whole entire planet, okay? But because of the movement, right, of the earth around its axis, moving around the sun, and then the moon going around the earth, the course of the eclipse changes, right? It looks like the eclipse is traveling. And so it's kind of an interesting phenomena. So it's going to be visible in, on certain parts on the globe, right? You can look that up specifically where you can actually, see the eclipse happen. But it's going to be a partial eclipse, so the sun's disk is going to be partially obscured by the moon. Now, how I will go about this, I'm going to explain a little bit about how eclipses are being formed, right? This is Rahu and Ketu, right? The north and south node of the moons, right? And they're formed by the interaction of the moon revolving around the earth with the ecliptic, right? The ecliptic is the apparent path that the sun, and all the other planets travel along. The moon, of course, represents the mind, and what the moon is the manas, okay? So through the moon, we experience ourselves subjectively, okay? So our subjective consciousness is reflected or represented by the moon. The sun, of course, represents the soul, right? That eternal divine spark in each one of us, right, in all beings. And so when these two sattvic planets, right, and sattva means, or sattvic means, true essence, your true essence, connect, right, when these two planes intersect, right, the moon revolving around the earth and intersecting with the ecliptic, this is going to be important, right? So Rahu and Ketu represent the path of our consciousness. It is the axis along which our consciousness travels to evolve, right? So because they're created by the sun and the moon, the path of the sun and the path of the moon connecting, okay? So I'm going to illustrate this with a little graph here. I made this little silly drawing, but hopefully it's going to, make things clear. So this is here a representation of the sun, okay? This is the path of the earth going around the sun, right? This is, in fact, the ecliptic, because if we're looking on earth, it's the apparent path that the sun makes around the earth. Then we also see the moon. This is the moon traveling around the earth, okay? So now, whenever the path of the moon, right, in her travels south, right, meaning entering the southern ecliptic hemisphere, because this is the ecliptic, and you can look at it as a plane, right, and planes always stretch into infinity. So whenever the moon, the path of the moon, enters that southern ecliptic hemisphere, right, where it crosses the ecliptic, right, in other words, this is where the south node is being formed, right? And these are Rahu and Ketu, or the south and north node of the moon, are mathematical points, right? So we can actually see them when eclipses happen. And this particular eclipse in Capricorn is going to be near the south node, right? So the south node is also called the descending node, right? Astronomically speaking. So a descension is always connected to letting go of something, right? The death of something. Now, I wrote here 5.9 degrees because if you look at the plane of the sun and then compare that to the plane of the moon, right? The moon is at a 5.9 degree angle to the ecliptic plane. You see, so that's why they can actually intersect. So whenever the moon travels up north, right? Whenever it crosses the northern ecliptic hemisphere, right? This is where Rahu, or the north node of the moon, is being formed. You see, and so Rahu is also called the ascending node. Okay, ascension is also always connected to the birth of something. And as I mentioned, Rahu and Ketu represent the path that our consciousness is traveling along. So Rahu represents the birth of individual consciousness, right? And Ketu represents the death of individual consciousness and the merging with the collective consciousness. Okay, so Ketu is an indicator of liberation, right? Moksha is a term which is translated as liberation. And then Rahu, of course, is where we need to evolve, right? Where we need to step into to evolve our consciousness. That's why Rahu, has all these tricky, illusory, difficult connotations. Okay, I'm going to talk also a little bit about that. Okay, so most important thing is that they're being formed by the sun, the soul, and the subjective, the reflection of the soul, which is the moon, right? And these two main players, Sattvic planets, interacting, connecting. Of course, the moon represents our self-image, okay? And the moon is waxing and waning, right? So the moon, that's why, our subjective selves, which includes our memories, our longings, our desires, our emotions, right, are represented by the moon. And they're waxing and waning, right? So one time we feel good, 2 minutes later we feel bad, another 10 minutes later we feel neutral again, and so on. So the moon is waxing and waning. And so, of course, the goal of Rahu and Ketu is to unite, the big evolutionary goal is to bring together that fully masculine force, which is represented by the sun, the soul, and the subjective nature of our beings, right, which is represented by the moon, which is the fully feminine planet, okay, to unite those and to become immortal beings, right? This is what the nodes are helping us evolve towards. Okay, now Rahu and Ketu are not planets, right? They're eclipse points, but in Vedic astrology they are referred to as grahas, right? Graha means seizer, right? Seizing something, so they can seize your consciousness. In fact, one of the names for Rahu is seizer, right? So it can grab your consciousness to evolve your consciousness, to get you out of the comfort zone, right? Which is represented by Ketu, right? Where we have, created our security paradigm, which is very strongly connected to our ancestral lineage, right? So Ketu is very much, how you were brought up and so on, the environment you were brought up in, and the development of your consciousness in that environment. And of course, your parents are going to be the closest to that, right? And so Rahu, represents where we need to go into. Rahu represents the dangerous jungle that feels very insecure, right? Whatever Rahu indicates in your horoscope, you're going to be very reluctant to actually get into, right? Depending on, Rahu's Lord's condition and so on. So, but it is the way to go. Rahu is where we need to develop our consciousness. Rahu is going to create this compulsive need within us to push us out of our comfort zone, to again evolve that consciousness. Okay, so it's going to feel frightening because Ketu is where we have created that paradigm, that security. So Ketu feels secure, but Ketu is where we suppress life energy. Okay, is where we suppress experiencing life fully, right? It feels secure, but at the same time we create disease there, right? Okay, so depending on these nodes, lords, conditions, okay, the lords of these planets, of these grahas, it's going to show whether a person is actually capable of evolving that axis sufficiently to become much more fulfilled in life, right? And to get out of the suppression that Ketu represents. Of course, there's also, exceptions, like, for example, if Ketu's lord is with Rahu or Rahu's lord is with Ketu, there's going to be different accents. There's going to be a different emphasis, right? I'm not saying that it's that simple of just looking at lords and then see how this will evolve. You have to look at the whole horoscope, of course. But now there's a very interesting similarity between the path of Rahu and Ketu and the first and seventh house axis. Okay, so Rahu and Ketu is, the axis along which our consciousness evolves. And then, of course, the first house and the seventh house are the path through which our body evolves. Okay, through which we act out our bodily karmas, we could say. So, because of course, this is a representation of the earth. So the earth revolves around its axis, right? So the surface of the earth revolves around its core. And where that plane at the time of your birth, right, intersected with the eastern horizon, so on your local horizon, so the east point on your local horizon, which is due east, where that plane intersected with the ecliptic, right? This is determining your first house or the ascendant. This represents the birth of your body. which in Vedic astrology is referred to as the Deha, okay, so the body. And then, when you would look due west, right, this is representing, which is going to be 180 degrees away from the ascendant. This is representing the 7th house cusp, which represents the death of the body, right, when the physical karmas are worked through, right, and you just die. They're an axis, right? So the first 7th house is an axis, and then Rahu and Ketu are an axis. Also, if you look at similarities between the 7th house represents foreign countries, right? Rahu represents foreign countries, for example. Ketu represents the flag, the home, right? And then the first house is, of course, the body, which is, it's where we live. It's the castle we live in. And it is Rahu, the ascending node, right? The birth of individual consciousness that is pointing the way. We need to fully integrate Rahu to attain liberation in Ketu. See, to illustrate this a little further, let's get into the myth of Rahu and Ketu a little bit. See, Rahu and Ketu are, in fact, an asura or a demon called Svarbhanu. Right? And Svarbhanu was one of the demons that got into the line of the devas, right, or the gods, or the angels. This demon, Svarbhanu, got into the line of the devas. Actually, he positioned himself between the sun and the moon to get the nectar of immortality. And there was a pact between Vishnu, the Lord of all manifestation, right, and the devas, because the devas were losing the battle against the asuras, and they were complaining to Vishnu. They wanted help, and so Vishnu said, okay, I'm going to make sure that you get the nectar of immortality, right? And in order to do that, you need to work together with the asuras to churn the ocean, right? And Vishnu told the devas, whatever comes out of the churning of the ocean, right, this milky ocean, whatever comes out, the asuras can have everything. Just wait until the nectar of immortality comes out, and I make sure you guys get it. Okay, so the devas and the asuras came together, right, and they churned the ocean, right. Now, before that happened, they tried that first, but then it kind of failed. And then Vishnu, manifested a turtle, right? And so the turtle just swam into the ocean and became bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it became this huge turtle. And this was born out of Saturn, right? So this turtle was born out of Saturn. But Vishnu is always underlying, right? So everything comes out of Vishnu. So now this turtle was able to lift the earth out of the astral plane. Once that was done, right, so this shows that Saturn is going to be very important in this whole story, right, of Rahu and Ketu, because it is Saturn that did that work. And so in order for the asuras and devas to churn the ocean, and so they did, and Vishnu had manifested himself as Mohini, which was the most beautiful woman on earth. And so what happened is that the asuras were completely intoxicated by her presence. And so, because, Vishnu wanted to distract the asuras when he was giving the nectar of immortality to the devas, right? And so, but there was this one clever, skillful asura, Svarbhanu, right, which said, okay, this is not, I'm seeing through this. I'm going to just get into the line of the devas and get their nectar of immortality. And he did, right? The moment that he, swallowed a little drop of nectar, the sun and the moon, notified Vishnu, and Vishnu took his Sudarshana chakra, right, which is a representation for the ecliptic, right, the ecliptic here, and cut this demon in two, and the head became Rahu, and the tail became Ketu, right. So what is important is that the asuras represent our primordial consciousness, right. And the devas, of course, represent the higher consciousness, our divine consciousness. And, the fact that these guys needed to work together shows that we need the asuras and devas together to attain liberation. That's the whole point of this story here, right? So we need that strength, that primordial strength, and that divine consciousness within us to unite and to churn the ocean to get the nectar of immortality, which is liberation. Okay, so Rahu has many names, right? Dark, for example, Tamas is one of the names of Rahu, because, smoky also. So whatever it influences, because we are not experienced there, all right? Because we're have a strong fear to get into that area, because we hold so much on to Ketu, right? It makes it, we create all these fears and illusions and dreams, and so there's a lot of fear created whatever Rahu represents. And Rahu is said to grant wishes, right? So it can give you many things on a concrete worldly level, because it's a very worldly planet, right? Rahu, whatever Rahu represents, you cannot tackle just by closing your eyes and getting into meditation or something. Rahu is what you need to feel, experience, what you need to taste, what you need to get into fully and live it, right? And through living that, through failing, because Rahu is going to give this compulsive need within you, compulsive desires. This is coming from your deep subconscious being, because it wants to push you out of your comfort zone. So by creating desires within you which cannot be fulfilled, but you're going to go after these desires anyway. And once you get those things, because it is granting wishes, then the ego becomes completely disillusioned and not fulfilled deeply, right? And because the eventual liberation lies with Ketu, right? So not being fulfilled means that we have to transmute these desires that lead nowhere, also indicated by Rahu, transmuting those desires, right? One of the things, symbols for Rahu is also a snake, like serpentine, right? It's a snake, and snakes are always about transmuting lower desires that are not capable of fulfilling us deeply. So it's a tricky thing. Rahu is a trickster in that sense. It tricks the ego to go after something, and then the ego gets disillusioned, right? Because the ego is just completely fragmented. It doesn't see the whole. It just wants to satiate its immediate desire, right? And can be very great desires, right? So if you see Rahu is connected to, like insanity, and when you see rapists and all this heavy stuff, or this is when Rahu is acting, because it brings out that deep shadow, right? That deep primordial aspect of the being. And when it's not mature, when the consciousness, the soul is not mature, it's gonna create serious problems. Okay. And then Ketu, the planet of liberation, the planet of moksha. Now Ketu is the most narrow planet, right? It can give a great focus. It can also give great depression, right? And you often see this with people with great breakthroughs. Ketu is where you suppress your life energy, right? Where you feel comfortable. One of the names for Ketu is flag, also smoky, right? But like a flag, right? So it's where you feel accomplished, also where you have planted your flag, where you have conquered something. Castle is also one of the names, so where you feel secure in your behavior, and it can be behavior that is destructive. This is the whole point, right? This is how Ketu can suppress life energy. Ketu, the descending node, it's where we let go of our individual consciousness, where we merge with the collective consciousness. So where we really need to let go, because otherwise it's going to become so narrow, so limiting, so inhibiting, that it can lead to catatonic states and this kind of thing. You see this, right? And if you look at some of the philosophers, Ketu is like this laser sharp intelligence, right? And so it can do great things. It can bring this incredible focus, one-pointed focus, for example. But when it is projected onto something that is wrong or false, then it would create serious problems. We're always talking about Rahu as the troublemaker, and it is because, see, one of the names for Rahu is also moon troubler, right? Because it eclipses the moon. See, Rahu is said to have a hunger to eclipse the moon, right? And the sun, Ketu has a hunger for eclipsing the sun, and the moon represents our self-image. And whatever you experience in life, whatever you have in your life, if your self-image is not clear, it's not good, right? If you think of yourself as a failure, whatever you have, it's going to prevent you from being happy, right? I'm not talking about this unrealistic, happiness, but I mean, naturally feel happy, like feel at peace with yourself and enjoy living, enjoy getting up, and enjoy going to sleep, and enjoy life very naturally. Okay. So when the moon is afflicted, right, and that's why Rahu moon conjunctions are so difficult, because the moon, which represents the mind, the consciousness, subjective consciousness, is troubled by Rahu, right? It shows the need of development, to develop that moon, okay, to develop that consciousness. So it's a real affliction, right? It's very difficult, especially in a woman's horoscope, to feel peace of mind with a Rahu moon conjunction. Now, on the other hand, a Rahu moon conjunction, especially, it's going to be tough early on in life. But these women are, especially in the second half of their life, they have already worked so much on their Rahu position, because the moon is such a pivotal player, right? That they can make great progress in their consciousness, right? And they can become really fulfilled in life. You'll see this happen. So in the beginning, serious tumultuous things and serious confusions and peculiar behavior also, right? Whenever you see Rahu moon, you're always going to feel, okay, there's something really peculiar about that specific expression. Cancer is the original fourth sign of the zodiac, which rules the heart and emotional peace of mind. This is important, right? Because Rahu is in the sign of Cancer as we speak. And so how do you feel about yourself is going to be determining your happiness, right? How do you feel about and deal with life circumstances is going to determine your happiness. That's why, Rahu moon, Saturn moon conjunctions are very difficult, right? Saturn moon, the mind becomes really detached. There can be a lot of pain, especially in, childhood and young adult life and so on. But eventually, it's also strong spiritual placement because of that, because the moon becomes really detached and is able to know what it needs, right? Because you see, the moon and our needs are fundamental, right, in how we direct our lives. This is the big lesson of Rahu in Cancer, to become emotionally grounded. Capricorn is the sign of action, right? It's the original 10th sign of the zodiac, and the 10th house is in Vedic astrology called the Karma Bhava, which is the action house, and it's an earth sign, right? So earth is always connected to the material, and so actions that are motivated to create material security. Cancer and Capricorn are two movable signs, and movable signs are all about change, or often radical change. So Cancer looks for a new feeling, right? It wants to ground its feelings. It's always going to act because of how it feels. So Rahu in Cancer is an affliction to Cancer, right? Rahu creates this turmoil, this confusion. So the person is not going to feel what he or she needs. And because there's no clarity there, the actions coming out of that are going to be confusing, and they're going to be disturbing, the material, which is represented by the opposite sign here, which is Capricorn. So their actions in the material world are going to be haphazard, not conscious. It's going to create failure there. So for Cancer, Rahu in Cancer, it's super important to become emotionally connected, right, to attune to their emotions and to what they actually need. The emotional need is going to be fundamental in how we direct our lives, right? Okay, so we see a big emphasis on the sign of Capricorns. Capricorn represents the thighs and the upper parts of the knees, right? So the thigh bone, right, which is the femur, right, which is the largest and densest bone in the body, which shows that Capricorn can endure, can accomplish a lot, because it is the sign of accomplishment, right? Through hard work and perseverance. Capricorn is an earth sign, so as I mentioned, right, connects to material security. Material security can also relate to humans, right, relating to human beings. Relational, right, can also connect to that, but it's creating something on a concrete and a material level. It's connected to status also, and so on, like your persona and personality is very much Capricorn. It's ruled by Saturn. Saturn is, of course, the planet of our complexes, our mortality. See, there's an intimate connection between Ketu, the sun, and Saturn, right? Because I mentioned Ketu has a special hunger, or a hunger for eclipsing the sun, right? Rahu eclipse for eclipsing the moon. You know, because Ketu represents the truth of the matter, right? The avatar that is connected to Ketu was the one that delivered the Vedas to the Lord of, you know, creation, for him to transmit that into the next cycle of creation, right? So, you know, the fish avatar, which is connected to Ketu, Mina, right? That's why Ketu in Pisces is considered a spiritual placement. Saturn is a pivotal player. If we look at the myth, right? Saturn, the turtle, you know, bringing up the earth out of the ocean into concrete manifestation for the devas and the asuras to be able, you know, to turn the ocean, to get the nectar of immortality, which is liberation. So Saturn, of course, represents our complexes. Saturn represents our mortality. When the moon represents a healthy ego, Saturn represents the pains of that ego. But Saturn is our body identification, right? So it makes us mortal. You know, Saturn rules the earth. Without Saturn, we cannot survive. The sun represents the soul. Ketu represents the truth of the matter. Now, to realize the truth of the matter, we need to incarnate. We need to survive. We need to have a physical body. And this is what Saturn makes sure we have, right? So it makes us, it helps us endure, persevere the whole Rahu saga, right? So they said that Rahu gives the results of Saturn and Ketu gives results of Mars, the two malefics, right? The two cruel planets, Krura planets in astrology. So we need a good Mars and a good Saturn. It's good Saturn to persevere through these hardships, because when we're talking about the nodes, we're not talking about, you know, one lifetime. We're talking about a whole cycle of evolution. Okay, so Saturn represents enduring the pains, becoming psychologically clear, secure, free. Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius. Capricorn is an earth sign. Aquarius is an air sign, but they both have water connotations, right? Because Aquarius is symbolized by, you know, water, right? And it is, you know, depicted as, you know, a man with a jug of water. And then Capricorn is also described as the water goer, right? Because Capricorn in Vedic mythology is connected to the crocodile or the makara, right? So, which is a large aquatic creature. So both Saturn-ruled signs are evolving emotionally. And this is very important. And of course, they precede liberation, which will happen in Pisces, right? Which is, of course, a water sign. Becoming emotionally grounded, secure, in contact to what we really need, and to act on that, and to be conscious of why we act, right? If we're not clear emotionally and also psychologically, of course, then how can we create anything of value, of material value also, something that can make us feel secure? Because if it's not connected to your heart, if it's not connected to expressing who you truly are, which is always, which is, you know, both connected to Cancer, then it's gonna drain you, right? And this is what Ketu represents, is where you're gonna suppress life energy. You know, if you're motivated to act because of, you know, mere status and this kind of thing. I'm just giving some, you know, simple examples. Or if you're not in contact with what you truly need, then it cannot, the whole material dimension cannot be truly fulfilling as well. And perhaps you're gonna depend on that, and it's going to make you feel empty and so on. So this is what, you know, Ketu and this whole, you know, combo there in the sign of Capricorn represents. Mercury is going to help us look for ways to investigate in how to go about this. Mercury is going to manifest that sign as well. So Saturn is a manifestor in Capricorn. Mercury is also a manifestor in Capricorn. So we have two manifesting grahas. Okay, so to resume this, we have an eclipse happening in Capricorn, right? Capricorn, the original 10th sign of taking actions that secure our material well-being. Okay, so connected to status, authority, institutions, and this kind of thing. We have Pluto there. Pluto is the ego basher. Pluto wants to create breakthroughs on a level of energy, how we direct our energy, because it's numerologically connected to Mars, right? Mars is the 3rd planet. Pluto is the 12th planet. Mars is strong in Aries there, right? So it's going to square all these planets in Capricorn as it moves along Aries. So it's going to be about taking action, right? It's going to be, there's going to be some conflicts. And so in the sense of playing out within our consciousness, like what direction to take. But Mars is strong there, so it's going to make sure that we can take action, because Mars wants to exert what is within our consciousness, right? So there's going to be some clashes because, of course, Pluto there, the South Node, always shows completions, endings, is where we need to step out of the way and to make sure that things evolve through Cancer. Cancer is where Rahu is. Rahu is where we need to develop, okay? A Cancer wants to create a new feeling, wants to feel inspired, wants to go within to find out what it needs to feel fulfilled, to connect to its heart, okay? So whenever your actions are clear, when you're clear in your emotions, you're clear in taking action in the world as well, which is Capricorn, okay? So this axis, of course, you know, in their extremes, they're always going to act very similar, right? These signs. And also, so Mercury is going to help out there because it's a manifester. Saturn is manifesting Capricorn as well. This is applying Gemini's 2nd source of strength. It's strong there in its own sign. But whenever we see Saturn Sun conjunctions, it's always ego bashing as well, right? Because Saturn represents these complexes and resistance. Sun is the soul, right? So, and the Sun is being eclipsed. But this is a time to stand still, not to move. Like during the time of the eclipses, it's good to reflect more. It's important to think about and to contemplate about what actions to take. The responsible thing is to connect to what you need to feel nurtured on an emotional level, to become clear, psychologically, emotionally grounded, and from there redirect your actions and move forward with life. Of course, it's going to depend on your personal horoscope and what is actually going to happen, right? So for some people, not much happens. For other people, it's life changing, because the nodes are always going against the norm, right? The nodes are always retrograde. Rarely they go direct, but most of the time they're retrograde. So they're always going against the norm. They want to create changes, karmic changes, fated changes. So for some people, it can play out like that, you know, and you can see it worldwide. There's always an incredible intensity. So I just want to mention, I co-authored a book with Carmina Amza, a Romanian astrologer and researcher, named Astrology Explained: Ancient Principles for the Modern Mind. So if you're interested, you can find it on Lada's website. So have a good year, and talk to you later.